Hi ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our second video lesson, and Rosie is going to join us again as we learn about the second rock type, that it would be sedimentary rocks. As we said yesterday, rocks are placed in one of those three groups based upon how they formed. Igneous rocks yesterday were from molten rock, and today sedimentary rocks, as their name implies, form from sediment. And when we say sediment, that can be small, tiny particles of things like sand, silt, mud, clay, the shells and remains of once living organisms, or things that just come out of water. And we'll classify sedimentary rocks that way, which is different from igneous rocks, where we classified those by their texture. Joining us today as well is an old friend of mine, Rocky. Rocky was given to me by a former student many years ago, Hannah, and has been a fixture in this lesson on rocks. And actually, Rocky is a sedimentary rock. So, sedimentary rocks, just like igneous rocks, as I said, are going to be further classified. And in regard to sedimentary rocks, that will be by what did they form from. So, Rosie has a sample here for us. And this is a type of sedimentary rock that forms from things like mud, silt, and clay. A very, very common sedimentary rock. And this is a type of shale. Now, shale, like this, is dark gray to black, can be tan and brown and other colors as well. So number one on your list, you should write in the word, and we'll show it to him, Rosie, shale. So write that in for number one. That is shale. And as I said, there is our example of shale right there. So everybody should have their Google slide open. And my suggestion is you have maybe two tabs open on your devices, one with the video you can play and pause, and the other with the Google slide, so you can fill those spaces in as we go. As we said, number one was shale, the type of sedimentary rock formed from really small particles, as we said, mud, silt, clay, things like that. And you probably heard of Marcellus shale here in Pennsylvania. That's some shales found pretty far down here, and that's where they're extracting the natural gas that Pennsylvania has quite an abundance of. And that's all millions and millions and millions of years old. All right, so on the Google Slides, number two, you see there are another type of clastic rocks, rocks made from pieces of previously existing rock. And if it's made up of particles about the size of a grain of sand, well, guess what? The size of a grain of sand. That would be sandstone. If you think of the Grand Canyon, it's made up of a lot of sandstone. Again, it can be in different colors. It can be more of a brown color than the reddish brown you see here. Again, it's a fairly common sedimentary rock. So those particles are bigger than the particles in shale. And it's a lot of quartz, which is obviously a pretty abundant mineral here on our planet. So that leads us to the third type of clastic rock, and this one is called a conglomerate. Okay, conglomerates kind of look a little bit like a piece of concrete, though they're really not. There's some pebbles and so on in it with some very small particles around it. So if you have your Google slide and you open that up, for number two, you should have sandstone. And there it is for you to write in. And remember, even our friend Rocky is sandstone. You can tell his color is a little different than the other piece we had. So number two, sandstone. Now, number three on your Google slide, as we said, the one that looks kind of like concrete a little bit, with the pebbles in the fine grained background, that is what's called a conglomerate. Okay, so that's a little longer word if you want to get that written on your Google slide. Conglomerate, conglomerate. And that is our three types of clastic, not classic like Led Zeppelin and Aerosmith and all that. Clastic with a T, sedimentary rocks, those made from pre-existing rocks. So when, say, a river or a creek or something washes little particles away, deposits them somewhere. So like Pine Creek depositing it in the Allegheny River, and they build up over time and they get compacted together, then you're going to get something like shale or sandstone or conglomerate, these clastic sedimentary rocks. And that's the first slide. Okay, now it's time to move on to our second classification of sedimentary rocks, and that is one we call organic. On Jason, they called them biological. We're going to write in the word organic, and that would be letter B on the second slide on the Google Slides. And as I mentioned previously in class, back when we were at school, organic can mean coming from a living organism. Now, when we talked about minerals, we talked about how they had to go through geologic processes, and in most cases, that is what happens when we see the organic sedimentary rocks. Right here, we have two examples. One, at least I hope you know, and that is coal coming from old plant material. And those of you who are with me and my group at the museum, I showed you that carboniferous forest they had on display there and how those trees and so on end up being coal. To the right of the coal is limestone, a really common sedimentary organic rock. Again, you can see there's two different colors of it there. Sometimes it's used as a decorative rock. It could be part used in as a gravel in a driveway. And remember, both coal and limestone are used in the process of smelting iron ore to make things like steel. So these are organic. So if you write that in, letter B is organic. And the first example we talked about coming from the shells and so on of living organisms, that's limestone. So we said coal comes from like trees and so on from millions of years ago. Limestone actually comes from things that had like a calcium carbonate exoskeleton or shell. So things like clams and oysters, and millions of years ago there was a lot of coral. All of these are called mollusks, actually, if they're clams and oysters and snails, and then coral's a separate group. But any of these things that had calcium carbonate, there were so many of these that they were buried over time, again compacted, and later changed to rock. And these are the organic sedimentary rock, and there is a lot of limestone. It's, we have it below us just like we have coal, which gives us clues of the past right here where we live. So there in Hampton, where you guys are, it was once a carboniferous forest, and before that it was a shallow sea, and that's why there can be limestone found below where you're living as well. And that is our second classification of sedimentary rocks. The last one can be limestone as well, and this is called chemical. So letter C is going to be chemical. And what this means is that the rocks came from a water solution. So Rosie, you want to show that to everybody? That is chemical. And if you have ever been to any of those caverns and so on that you can tour, the Laurel Caverns and so on, that's all limestone. And as the water below the surface eroded that limestone away, it formed those caverns and so on. We can all go tour now. And if you see anything hanging from the ceiling, that is a stalactite. It has a C in the middle. Think of the ceiling, C, that's a stalactite. And when it drips down and forms a little mound on the ground, that's a stalagmite. There's a G in it. So if you ever have the opportunity to see those. In the caverns I've been in, they're there was a lack of those, but in some other places you'll see those. And those are chemical sedimentary rocks. Gypsum and halite and those things. Rock salt, which is halite, that we use to put on the roads, and actually we eat some of it and all of that as well. Those are all chemical. The water evaporated, it left it behind, and we get these chemical sedimentary rocks. They build up over time, so when we go and dig into the earth and find a deposit of salt, that gives us another clue that in the past that was once a shallow sea. So we have our three classifications of sedimentary rocks. We had the clastic from little pieces of pre-existing rock. We had the organic from once living organisms. And finally, the chemical when something precipitates or is left as an evaporite out of from water, leaving the rock behind. And that is sedimentary rocks, people. It's not so hard, is it? So Rosie, she just went on a walk. She's tired. She's had it and heard enough about rocks, I'm sure. And we can thank Rocky as well for joining us today. And we're getting through. We got two more things to talk about, and one is really, really quick in the future. So hope everybody's doing well, and I'll be